So welcome everyone to the Thursday evening class. And for those of you who are new to meditation or to this sort of meditation, I'd just like to give a little bit of an introduction to what it's all about before we actually sit down for some meditation today. Meditation is much sought after these days because of the way that we lead our lives and the demands that life makes on us. And it's not so much that life is going faster or we're not being able to keep up, but there are so many things competing for our attention all the time that by the end of the day we can feel quite exhausted by all the pressures of having our attention taken hostage the whole of the time. It's all very good being attentive to the things around you, but there comes a point where if the whole of your time your awareness is pulled away from you to the things around you, it's very hard to get it back again. And it's as if you end up knowing more about everything else in the world, but there's a huge meaningless vacuum inside yourself which you know nothing about because your mind is concerned with all those other things the whole of the time. For other people, it's like you just feel completely depleted of energy by the end of the day, and it's looking for a way to recharge our batteries in the same way that you would put your mobile phone back in the cradle at the end of the day to recharge its batteries again. And with the mind, the idea of the awareness and the energy that we use in deploying our awareness is that if the mind or the awareness is close to where the body is, then it can get back a lot of the energy again. And there are some places within the body which are particularly effective for this, and one point which we are interested in this particular meditation technique is a point at the center of the body, somewhere down near the solar plexus. If you are familiar with breathing technique, then if you breathe all the way in to your deepest breath, the point where the breath turns around again before it comes out is exactly the same point. So it's right at the center of your diaphragm. And that point is special because the longer the awareness can stay close to that point, the more energy it will recover for itself. And if you're a sort of person who is plagued by a lot of thoughts the whole of the time, then this is a place where there can be quiet from the thoughts. It's like a sort of a safe zone where the thoughts can't interfere or don't sort of keep on running and elaborating ad infinitum. So it's a quiet and peaceful place for the mind. How can you get your mind to go there? Well, you could follow your breath. That would be perfectly acceptable. But ideally, we'd like the breath to rest at a place which is stationary rather than constantly following the breath. So if you were going to follow the breath, you should pick a point on the breath where you feel happy to just keep the mind steady and let the breath flow through that point. But the way that we generally work in this technique is to use some sort of imaginary object that we conjure up in the mind, which we place in our imagination at that point that we want the mind to be. So perhaps something bright, like a picture of the sun shining, or the full moon, or a star, or a diamond. You could imagine a picture of that as if you see it in your mind down at that point. And for as long as you can hold that picture in your mind, then your mind will be in the same place. Even though you can't see the mind, you can see the object in the mind. The mind wanders off from that, you just bring it back again to the object. If the object disappears, then you just conjure up a new one. As for the possible problem of there being thoughts still popping up in the mind, interfering with the continuity of your peacefulness at the center of your body, sometimes we do use a mantra in this technique if the thoughts are rather insistent, if they're not going away when we ignore them. We could use a mantra such as these two Indian words, Samma Arahang, and we'd hear the sound of those on repeat over and over again in the mind, as long as it takes to sort of cut through the thoughts. You might have another mantra of your own which you prefer, in which case you can just substitute that one in. But it's like using words to cut through the random words that would otherwise come up in the mind, the verbal sort of loop in the mind. And we'd use the mantra only for as long as is necessary to calm the mind down to a point of silence where we can just stay with the inner object. Yeah. So what we'll do today is sit for meditation for about 45 minutes, and I'll lead you through that, leaving you that picture there, and don't worry too much about the exact position. Anywhere in that general area is fine, wherever feels comfortable for you. And I will say that for some people it tends to be more of a feeling than a picture, in which case you could feel the picture rather than seeing it. You'd like to settle yourself down into a comfortable position for your meditation today. Closing your eyes very gently and breathing deeply to yourself while letting go of any tensions in your body, all the way from the top of your head, right the way down to the tips of your toes. And in this body scan of ours, we can allow the muscles of our face to become soft, taking care that even the way we close our eyes is as gentle as possible. Bearing in mind that the muscles around our eyes are the most sensitive in our body. And if we can close our eyes gently, then the rest of our body will relax in the same way. So we allow that wave of relaxation to pass down from our face, through our neck and shoulders, relaxing all the muscles there. Relaxing both arms, forearms, hands and fingers. So the way our hands rest in our lap should feel as light and gentle as possible. Continuing on down, we relax the muscles of our torso, whether it be our chest, trunk and abdomen. Relaxing both legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes. Until the whole of our body seems to melt away into the atmosphere around us, comfortable enough to be able to forget about it, and allowing us to turn our attention instead to the feeling inside us, inside the space of our body, where we can spend a few moments making sure our state of mind is also as relaxed as our body. So ideally, our state of mind should feel awake and alert, but also relaxed. picking up on the energy of solidarity with like-minded meditators in our group. Because there's always a sharing of the inspiration to meditate that brushes off on all around and brings us a sense of belonging. So at this point we can withdraw our awareness within the space of our body. To a place inside ourselves that feels free of any worries and concerns. Although there may be many things going on in our busy lives, but we've set aside a special time for ourselves to recover and relax our sense of well-being. So we conjure up a sense of happiness, joy, and freedom in our mind, while putting aside any unwanted thoughts. And as we nurture the sense of happiness and joy inside ourselves, we allow that same feeling to grow and expand within ourselves until there's no space left in our mind for any other sort of thought. Ideally, we'll feel as if our whole body is light, expanding, or as if it's disappeared altogether. And at this point, for those of you who are ready, you can start to practice your favorite method of meditation. Now that your body and mind are completely relaxed. For those of you who are new to meditation or who favor the Dhammakaya approach, I'd invite you to imagine that inside your body is just an empty space or a hollow cavity with no organs or tissues, muscles or bones. Almost as if your whole body had been transformed into a hollow shell with nothing on the inside. And in order to act as a sort of anchor for the mind, you might like to picture a bright object in your mind's eye, such as a full moon shining, a shining sun, maybe a bright shining star, or maybe a diamond sparkling. Even if you can't directly see that object, you may find that the feeling of the presence of the object will work just as well. You may feel as if you have one of those objects floating within the space of your body. And at this point, you can allow the object to flow gently down within the space of your body, following the breath down to the deepest point of the breath at the diaphragm, a place known in this tradition as the seventh base of the mind. But in fact, anywhere in that general area which feels comfortable for you will work just as well. So we maintain our mind in place lightly and gently by means of the inner object we have imagined at that point, as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, not letting our mind wander off anywhere else if we can help it. But if the mind should wander, as inevitably happens, we just bring it back again each time to the center as before. And if the inner object disappears, we can think of a new one. If thoughts interrupt our meditation, we do our best to ignore them rather than elaborate on them. But if we find the mind becomes plagued by thoughts, we find our brain is working like the proverbial hamster wheel, then we might find it useful to make use of a traditional mantra, such as hearing the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up from the center of the body over and over again, until the mind starts to gain independence from those thoughts, until the spaces between the thoughts start to last longer than the thoughts themselves. In effect, the meditation is unique in the way over thousands of years it has contributed to human spirituality, culture, bringing a sense of grace and meaning to the lives of all who practice, while fostering honesty, compassion, and respect for living beings. In the present age, the need for humility and deep empathy are so essential for the well-being of all on our planet. So as we meditate today, we can make the resolve to ourselves to continue to work together to build the lives of peace and dignity for all on a healthy planet. There are many benefits that arise from coming together to explore a shared spiritual path that can lead all practitioners to become free from suffering, while touching progressively upon an inner experience of enlightenment. And as we gradually shed the shortcomings in the mind, whether it be covetousness, passions, malevolence, or delusion, by letting go of the unmindful, the uncomprehending, the unconcentrated residues of a wandering mind and faculties. As we move incrementally closer to that inner space of purity, we find it doesn't actually matter where we meditate. But any place we practice meditation, even at home, even if we're unable to go to a meditation center in person, help to bring ourselves closer to the seventh base of the mind, a point in the body which is a portal towards deeper wisdom. And any approach to the meditation that internalizes the mind within the body will eventually converge with that shared spiritual path and will ultimately lead to inner wisdom. So at this point, I'd like to encourage everyone to continue to practice meditation, keeping the mind on track lightly and gently, with our inner object at the center of ourselves, as we continue to focus the mind gently in peacefulness at the center of the body for a few more moments until we come to the appropriate time. has wandered off onto other things, each time you realize, just bring your attention back again to the center of your body as before. Bring your attention back to the center of the body for as many times as it takes to build up that sense of continuity between your awareness and that special place at the center of yourself. As you continue to cultivate the mind in this way, you'll find the number of thoughts become gradually less, with or without the mantra. You find that the gaps between the thoughts gradually become longer, until the gaps between the thoughts become longer than the thoughts themselves. And you start to be able to see through to what lies beneath the thoughts in the mind, beneath that superficial layer of rational thinking, giving you access to more intuitive places in the mind, a deeper level of the subconscious, gut feelings, inner wisdom, till at the point where the thoughts die down completely, we'll start to have a permanent connection to those deeper functions of the mind. Sometimes when you're new to meditation, you may find that there are so many things popping up in the mind, as if its busyness never ceases. Sometimes like the ocean waves, one after the other, with the thoughts coming in. But we allow those thoughts to come and go, accepting that this is how the mind is, without getting worried or upset about it during the meditation itself. The less we worry about it, the more we accept the reality. Just acknowledging and bringing ourselves back to our subject. And we'll gradually become master of the mind, rather than a slave to our own distractions. But for now we keep our mind on track, lightly and gently, keeping our mind in place with nothing more than a feather-light touch. Each to our own practice for a few more moments now in silence, until we come to time for some loving-kindness meditation. Continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body as continuously as we can, for as long as we can. Always at the center of whatever inner experience we have built up for ourselves, whether it be in the form of some sense of well-being at the center of ourselves, a sense of inner illumination, images within us, large or small. We place our mind gently at the center of that. And if we place our awareness exceedingly gently, there will be a sense of melting away, which allows that inner experience to spread outwards from the central point, almost like ripples spreading across the surface of a pond, around the place where a pebble has been thrown in, spreading in ever-widening circles from the epicenter. And in this way we spread the positive peace energy from the center of ourselves, initially to fill the whole of our body, every fiber of our being, every cell and molecule of our body. And this process of spreading is known as loving kindness. And initially we extend loving kindness towards ourselves with a sense of self-compassion, a love for who we are, at the very least a sense of acceptance, a sense of forgiveness. Because we need to love ourselves first before we can have love to share with others. Wishing ourselves to be well and happy, free from all suffering. Before allowing that same spreading of loving kindness to extend beyond the boundaries of our own body, outwards into the room around us, almost like a halo or an aura, outwards towards other sentient beings, the whole of the building, beyond that radiating outward into our entire neighborhood, with positive intention, as our loving kindness spreads to all the living beings in our midst, sharing that state of peace and happiness as we let it grow further, expanding to the entire town and county, to all sentient beings, all people, no matter where they are or who they may be, with a wish that all those living beings be touched by our loving kindness, with a sense of love and compassion which dispels all the negativity, all the negative elements that might affect the world, disappear as the loving kindness spreads further and further across the space of our world, above and beyond borders and boundaries, extending its warmth and compassion to every living being, every creature sharing this planet, with a tide of loving kindness which you might experience as a sense of well-being or an extending light that shines outwards towards the whole of the world to bring a state of happiness and contentment, with the wish that all sadness, sorrow, aggression be swept away by the beauty of this compassion. Just like a little candlelight can be used to light many more candles, until eventually the light becomes formidable, dispelling darkness. In the same way, from one person or two spreading loving kindness, the tide of compassion, acceptance, peacefulness and harmony can become formidable in the same way. So we make the wish for ourselves and for all those sentient beings around us, that may they be touched by this sense of inner peace, love and compassion. May all that negativity be swept away. We can also extend the loving kindness to particular loved ones, family members, relatives and friends, wherever they may be, whether they are still alive or whether they have already passed. Feeling them at our center and extending that energy of peace along with our loving kindness, along with our good wishes for them to be well and happy. We extend positive wishes for all without exception, with a sense of gratitude and appreciation, extending a sense of light, peace and harmony throughout the world in this way for the last few moments of our practice together. Sapi Buddha Balapata Pajekanan Chayam Balang Arahantanancha te jena rakambandami sapaso Sapaputthanupavena Sapatamanupavena Sapasankhanupavena Sattha Soti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So far, so good, everyone? New folks, all right? Ish? Well, something must be going on then. Hopefully in a good way. Yeah, but if there are any questions, then I'll be around later if you want to ask. Yeah. The things I've been talking about over the last few weeks in this Enlightened Living series are like a collection of character qualities or practices within Buddhism which, if they are followed, each step leads to the next one, and there are a total of 38 steps. And what I've been doing is working through each step in 2 lectures. And where we are at the moment is the subject of respect. And last time I explained that respect is a little bit different from expressing respect. Soldiers might salute a senior officer. It doesn't mean they respect them, but they are expressing respect. Respect itself is more like the attitude you have, and it's said to be very useful as a means to accelerate your ability to learn, especially on spiritual topics. And I talked last time about the things which respect is not, which is like you don't respect people because you want their respect back. Same word, but a different purpose. But within the context of Buddhism, it's more to do with doing the opposite of finding fault with things. So if you come across something new, then respect would be the thing which gives you the potential to look for what you can learn about something which is new or unfamiliar to you. And there may be things which are right and wrong with people you come across, things you come across, situations you come across. But if you're a person who has respect, then your first inclination would be to try to look for things which are positive in whatever that is, and extract those parts for yourself and learn from them and better yourself as a result of them. So the opposite of finding fault with things. And within Buddhism itself, then there are particular things which are given respect in particular. So this is what I'm talking about today, is more the what of respect rather than the how or the why. Okay? And there's a list of 7 things which are found in several places in the Buddhist scriptures, which are held up as things which are of great potential benefit for those who are on a spiritual journey, which if they can look for what is good in those things, then it will benefit them greatly. So some of these you may have heard of before, but may not know much detail about them, and maybe not know a great deal of detail about how you might respect those things in a way that would derive benefit for yourself. So the Buddha, who is a person, the Dharma, which is what he taught. Sangha means a community of those who have followed the teaching successfully. Education, which is a sort of phenomenon. Meditation, which we know a little bit more about. the principle of non-recklessness, which we've heard about over the last few weeks, and also the principle of hospitality. So 7 in all. And of course, they're very different in nature. You've got principles there, you've got people there, you've got ways of treating people, quite a mixture. So obviously using the word respect for all of those might have different ways of interpreting the word respect. So I'll start at the top of the list and talk about how Buddhists generally show respect or treat the Buddha with respect. And this differs depending on whether the Buddha is still alive or whether he has passed away. So the Buddha is still alive? Not really, no. He did pass on about 2,500 years ago. But when he was still alive, then the monks who were learning from him had particular ways in which they would treat the Buddha to show respect. And he had many qualities, of course, which you can learn about if you ever read in the Chanting Book translation. Things like being a wise person, having good conduct, having clearly understood the world, and being able to teach it to other people, for example. So when he was still alive, the monks would go to see him 3 times a day. That would be considered respectful. If it was lay people, then they would go when they could. Yeah? If the Buddha was not wearing shoes, then they would also not wear shoes. If the Buddha was in a lower place than them, then they would not go somewhere higher than he was. If he had not put up an umbrella, then they would also not put up an umbrella. These would all be considered ways of showing respect. And also for monks, there's particular customs to do with wearing a robe. You might notice that I've got one shoulder open. That's considered a humble way of wearing the robe. A less humble way would be covering both shoulders, which is how monks dress when they go outside the temple. Yeah? So if the Buddha had opened one shoulder, so humble, then all the other monks would not cover both shoulders. Yeah? They would adopt the same level of humility of dress. Yeah? So that would be how you would behave if the Buddha was still alive. However, we are in a time when the Buddha has already passed on, but we still wish to show respect to the Buddha, but the way that's done is a little bit different. So, hence the posthumously. So, often this refers to showing respect to pagodas, which are the sort of memorials in which the relics of the Buddha are enshrined. So they would be treated with respect, or Buddha statues. Yeah? So, ways of paying respect to a pagoda would include things like going on a pilgrimage to what are known as the 4 holy sites of Buddhism. Have you heard of them? Can you tell me any of them? For example, where the Buddha was born, which is in modern-day Nepal, Lumbini Grove, where the Buddha was enlightened, which was in? Oh, well, that's a good start, yes. Bodh Gaya in India. So these are all pagodas of various sorts. You can see marking the spot. Where he gave his first teaching, a place called Sarnath. And those are, so Nepal, Northeast India for the second 2, and then Central India, Kusinagar, where the Buddha eventually passed away for the last time. So visiting them with a heart full of faith would be a way of showing respect. Some Buddhists go on a pilgrimage. They even have quite luxury ones these days. So the reason they would want to do that is because there's a quote in the scriptures, in fact in the Digha Nikaya, which says that if anyone makes that pilgrimage to the 4 holy sites with faith in their hearts, then they would go to heaven at the end of their life. So pretty good deal, right? So, splash out on a holiday to traipse around India, or they can do it in luxury these days with some of the Japanese ones where they have hotels conveniently positioned along the road. Yes, a good way of going to heaven for sure. Other ways of paying respect to the Buddha posthumously include paying respect to Buddha statues. Often respect is paid by doing what's known as the 5-point bow, which is where people bow down with their head down to the ground from a kneeling position. It's called 5-point, not because you get 5 points for it, but because 5 parts of your body are touching the ground at the same time, 2 knees, 2 elbows, and 1 forehead. Yeah? Or just paying respect by putting one's hands in a gesture of prayer. Some places they actually wash the Buddha statue. This would take place sometimes at Thai New Year, for example, out of respect. Apart from that, respecting Buddhist shrines or temple buildings. Usually people would pay respect to the Buddha statue when they arrive at the temple or when they leave. First thing they do when they arrive, last thing before they leave. If they enter a temple or pagoda compound, they would remove their shoes out of respect, which you seem to have done. And also not putting up an umbrella in a pagoda ground. Also, one should keep one's composure during the time one is in the temple, not chattering or doing amateur dramatics in the temple buildings, yes. And monks within the temple would wear their robes in the same way, with a humble, just one shoulder open. So, Buddha, before he passed away, after he passed away. The Dharma is the teachings which the Buddha gave during his life. So obviously he would teach them vocally or whatever. Many years later, these were written down as scriptures and passed from teacher to student over many generations. And these teachings are considered worthy of respect because they are timeless. They inspire people who learn about them to want to share them with other people. They are of that nature. They can be internalized, and they can be realized by those whose meditation is deep enough. Yeah? So they're in the scriptures, but in a sense you could rediscover them for yourself if your meditation is deep enough. Ways to pay respect to the Dharma teachings are that you should take the opportunity to learn about them wherever possible. You should treat them with respect, especially if they're written down, and the books should be treated with respect as well. And not the sort of books you would want to make pen marks on. Also, you shouldn't make fun of the teachings, and if you have the opportunity to teach them, then you should try to teach it accurately. Yeah. The community of those who follow the teachings, known as the Sangha. Some places they include just the monks. Some places they include just the enlightened monks, and some places they just talk about it as the whole Buddhist community of those who practice. So it depends on how you want to define the Sangha. But generally it is the enlightened monks, ones who have sort of are good examples for us to follow. So in their presence, we should maintain composure. We shouldn't lie down in their presence, for example. Shouldn't put up umbrellas or put on our shoes in the middle of the monastic community. And we shouldn't get in the way. Sometimes a monk is walking along, people like standing in the way or whatever, not really considered very respectful. Yeah. Not boasting about your knowledge of the Dharma in their presence, or answering questions on the Dharma unless the monk has invited you to do so. And looking after the needs of a monk and keeping an open house to the monks. So that's Buddha Dharma Sangha, often known as the Triple Gem, which we are fairly familiar with. But the Buddha went further and he said there's other things we need to be respectful towards, apart from these very obvious sort of objects of faith, you might call them. So education, surprising? Respect for education? Well, if you want to learn something, you better have respect for education. It doesn't mean you bow to your textbooks, but it means that you should be sincere in your studies and not reckless. You shouldn't take the attitude that you already know it all, and you should try to study in a way that you get to the core of the subject that you're studying. Meditation is also considered worth respecting. Not just, oh, I respect meditation, but I don't actually do it. So it would be something that you would take seriously, practice regularly. It's the thing which links theory to attainment, so it's a very important connector in the whole process of Buddhist sort of practice. So how would one be respectful of meditation apart from practicing it, taking it seriously? It's interesting to think that even after the Buddha became enlightened, he still meditated every day. Surprising? There's still more to know. Even if you're enlightened, there's still more to know. So meditation is obviously very important, even for those who are already enlightened. And for this reason, another thing which is worth remembering is that if you see someone else meditating, then you should have respect for them by not doing something that's going to disturb them from their meditation. So you should tiptoe quietly when you see other people meditating. And there's more. I said total of 7, number 6 and number 7. Non-recklessness, so not doing things which once you know the value of doing good things rather than sort of unscrupulous things in your life, then you ought to sort of keep yourself on the right side of the fence. And trying to keep your mind centered, whatever you're doing, both inside and outside the meditation, would be considered as non-recklessness. A little flag on the pagoda, if you remember, from the lecture we had a few weeks ago. And maybe the most surprising of all, respect for hospitality. So does that mean like meet and greet? Respect for guests, I suppose? Well, it's pretty big in all sorts of Buddhist culture. Sometimes I heard some really surprising stories about how well tourists are treated in Thailand. In fact, I never heard a bad word from any tourist who visited Thailand. Like, no matter how sort of gross they are, they all come back impressed from Thailand. And one story I heard was there's some sort of Westerner on the bus going in the wrong direction in Thailand. And a little old lady said, "Oh, like, you're on the wrong bus," and everything. She got off the bus with the guy, giving up her own journey, got on the other bus going the opposite direction with him until he got to where he needed to be, and then got back on the bus again in order to continue her journey. It's like just incredible how much hospitality or respect for hospitality is sort of imbued in that culture. And you can bet it comes from Buddhism. Also, in this, you heard me talking about people being offered the bed in the house while all the people who live in the house go and sleep on the floor somewhere, not sort of being offered the couch in many Buddhist households who are putting other guests up. So it's really taken very seriously. But the reason for that is that a teacher in our tradition mentioned that if people have respect for hospitality, then it will lead them towards respect for non-recklessness. If they have respect for non-recklessness, then it will lead them to have respect for meditation. If they have respect for meditation, it will lead them to have respect for education. If they have respect for education, it will lead them to have respect for the Sangha. If they have respect for the Sangha, it will lead them to have respect for the Dharma. And if they have respect for the Dharma, then it will lead them to have respect for the Buddha. So they're all connected one way or another. Usually the last one on the list will lead to all the other ones being fulfilled. So this is the importance of hospitality beyond merely meet and greet, which would be considered as material hospitality or amissa patisantan, but also looking after people with the appropriate spiritual advice or help, which would be providing spiritual hospitality or dhamma patisantana. Also, there are some secular objects of respect. And some of these we've mentioned previously, especially if they're secular people who have respect for all the 7 things I already mentioned. But certainly national leaders, kings, monarchs, who are established in the 10 virtues of monarch, like being sort of good and just and ruling with compassion for their subjects. Parents, because of all the good they have done us in the past. Teachers, preceptors, elders, older brothers or sisters generally. We learned about this last time with the elephant and the partridge and the monkey. Respecting each other according to seniority. You might say it's artificial, but it leads people to have respect and learn from one another and cooperate with one another. And also respect for younger brothers or sisters as well, if they are of particular virtue. In places where respect for secular objects is appropriate, it might be by standing up, making way for a person who you respect, standing to receive that person, especially in schools. All the students stand up to greet the teacher in Asia. And holding hands in a gesture of respect, if that is appropriate, or shaking hands or whatever, bowing or referring to them by their proper name. And as I said, with respect, whatever you're talking about, situation, people, things, whether they're monastic, whether they are secular, really behind the attitude of respect is in people who are not quite perfect, looking to try to find what you can learn from nonetheless. What are the redeeming features of that person which you can learn from, maybe incorporate into your own personality or repertoire for yourself. And I've got 2 stories from the scriptures which are quite amusing. One to do with the right-hand disciple of the Buddha who was called Sariputta, and another disciple of the Buddha. Both were enlightened, so in theory they should have all the imperfections in their mind already got rid of by the fact they had become enlightened. But of course, enlightenment doesn't work quite like that. Sometimes there are a few little habits that get through, usually fairly harmless peccadillos, which don't really make a difference one way or the other to a person's sort of ultimate enlightenment, but maybe still are in there somewhere. And with Sariputta, picture here, that's not him this lifetime, okay. Sometimes when he went on an alms round with a lot of other monks, so went out with the alms bowl collecting food, if there was a canal and there was a bridge to cross over the canal, sometimes he didn't bother using the bridge, but he would sort of leap over the canal, which is a bit strange. Yeah? Like, not very sort of dignified for a monk normally. Sometimes when he was on one of these Dhutanga walks or these sort of monastic pilgrimages, instead of camping on the ground like all the other monks did under the mosquito net, he would climb up into the treetops and sleep up in the branches. And everyone thought, oh, that's a bit strange. Isn't he supposed to be like an exemplary monk and all that? So they asked the Buddha about this, and they said, we were wondering, like, if your main disciple, like right-hand disciple, Venerable Sariputta, is he really enlightened? He does have some rather strange behaviors, like jumping over canals, sleeping in treetops. Doesn't sound like the sort of person who ought to be enlightened. And the Buddha said, although Sariputta is enlightened, there are some deeply ingrained aspects of his character that enlightenment has not changed, because previously he was born for many lifetimes as a monkey. Yeah? And there's another similar thing happened to another enlightened monk whose name was Pilina Vacha. And whenever he met someone, he would greet them with the words, "You peasant." The word vasala in Pali language. And if you didn't actually happen to be a peasant, and you got called a peasant every day, it might get rather irritating, even for the most patient people in the world. And even if they were aristocrats or they were even the king, then they weren't spared the peasant treatment from this monk. And again, some people were a little bit doubtful about the credentials of this supposedly enlightened monk. So they went to ask the Buddha, is this monk Pilina Vacha really enlightened or not? Because he seems to be going around insulting people the whole of the time. And the Buddha confirmed that he was indeed enlightened. But rather like Sariputta, he had certain deeply ingrained aspects of his character because for many lifetimes he had been born either as a king or an emperor. So it's like this everyone's a peasant attitude had sort of was rather deeply ingrained in his character. But the moral of this story is that even when a person has become enlightened, it's still possible for them to have some faults. And if the humble likes of ourselves are still looking for those faults, instead of looking at what we can learn from someone who is already enlightened, then it will not help us to make much progress in the Dharma practice. So it's better to remain respectful in our attitude, because for the overwhelming majority of people's character, there's goodness to be learned from, which we can try to look for if we are smart. So if you are new to meditation today, I'd just like to say I encourage you to practice further. You might have some idea about what the technique is now to find the center of your body, keep your mind there. If you can manage to meditate a little for maybe 20 minutes a day to start off with, at a time of the day which is convenient for you, then little by little you build up the familiarity with the center of the body, with the meditation, and you'll be able to go further each day in your practice. If you're getting a little bit hazy about how to actually meditate, there is an app for that called MindGem, which you can download for free onto your mobile phone, and it has lots of audio tracks which you can follow along with from teachers in our tradition. There are classes here in person, and most of them are shared online as well via the website of the temple, Facebook and YouTube channels. Tuesday evenings are generally a little bit shorter meditation. Thursday evenings generally a little bit longer, but the monks here in the temple take it in turn to teach on those days. Also, there's an online remnant from the pandemic where between 7 and 8 every Saturday evening it's possible to tune in via those Zoom coordinates and join meditators from all around Europe who do the same, many of whom don't live near enough a branch to be able to actually attend in person. So that might be a good way to meditate from the comfort of your home. Next Tuesday we have a special activity of floating candle rafts, which is a Thai tradition, but we are doing it as part of the full moon celebration on 8th of November in place of the normal Tuesday class, where the theme is floating away your worries. And a little heads up for those who have no particular plans over New Year is that although it's mainly for Thai people, greeting the New Year from the 30th of December through to the 2nd of January, people come along, sleep over here, meditate, eat lots of Thai food, do lucky dips, do a countdown by chanting, and other interesting activities. But there's quite a lot of teaching going on as well. I know already there's a few people who want to join it who have asked specifically to do it in English. So although it's a little bit more informal than the normal retreats we organize for the weekend retreats, it might be something you want to join all or part of. If you are interested in the details, then please speak to Auntie Kriwan, Auntie Ray, and she will make sure you have some accommodation waiting for you. Probably not warm enough to sleep in a tent anymore. Or maybe it is, yes. And last but not least, we are now famous, at least in Woking, courtesy of Woking News and Mail, because the last ceremony we did on the 23rd of October, the Katina ceremony, was given a full page of coverage in the local paper as well. So you might want to look at that and see if you have appeared in it. It seems that most of the Westerners have become angels in pointy hats for this particular issue. Yes. So that's probably all I want to say to you today, but if you have any questions, comments, or feedback at this point, I'd be very pleased to hear from you. It's the same thing again, so the whole year has come round. I'm not sure if we're doing it online or whether it will be purely in person. Yes. If you have a particular wish that it be online, then maybe talk to Auntie Kriwan. Yes. I think the idea now is more to be in person where possible. I hope you be blessed with happiness, success, and prosperity in life, and always have the attitude of respect that helps you to see the goodness in every person, situation, and object that you come across in your life.